In the early 20th century, there was a substance so strange that people treated it almost like magic. It glowed in the dark. It could burn tumors. It appeared in advertisements, tonics, face creams, and scientific demonstrations. Its name was radium, and for a short time, the modern world believed it had found a miracle. But one of the clearest ways to see the danger of a miracle is to watch who is asked to touch it every day. In factories across the United States, young women were hired to paint tiny numbers on watch dials and instrument panels. The work was delicate, respected, and unusually well paid. Some of the painters were teenagers. Some were sisters. Some brought friends into the factory because the job seemed like a gift. The paint they used was luminous. It contained radium salts mixed with zinc sulfide, so the numbers on a watch could be read in the dark. Soldiers needed glowing dials during World War I. Consumers wanted them afterward. In a room full of desks, the women bent over trays of small faces, dipping their brushes, painting numbers, and setting finished dials aside to dry. The most dangerous part of the job was also the smallest. The brush tips had to be extremely fine. Supervisors taught a technique called lip pointing. Dip the brush into the paint, touch it to the lips to make a perfect point, paint the number and repeat, lip, dip, paint, again and again. Each gesture looked harmless. Each gesture carried radium into the body. When workers asked if the material was safe, they were told not to worry. The public already thought radium was healthy. Doctors used radiation in medicine. Advertisers sold radium as vitality, beauty, and modern science. Some women left work with dust on their hair, skin, and clothes. They were called ghost girls because they glowed after dark. Some reportedly wore their best dresses to work so they would shine when they went dancing. That is what makes this story so disturbing. The first half looks like wonder, a glowing room, a skilled job, a modern product. Then the evidence changes. The glow does not stay on the surface. Radium behaves chemically like calcium, so the body can deposit it in bones and teeth. Once inside, it keeps emitting radiation. The poison is not a single dramatic wound. It is a slow attack from within. One of the earliest and most tragic cases was Amelia Maggia, often called Molly. She had worked at the Orange, New Jersey plant. Her first symptom seemed ordinary, a toothache. A tooth was removed, then another. The wounds did not heal. Her mouth became painful, her jaw deteriorated. Doctors struggled to explain what they were seeing. In 1922, she died. The cause was misidentified, and the company denied that the work had anything to do with it. Other women became ill too. Pain spread through jaws, hips, backs, and legs. Some developed anemia. Some suffered bone damage so severe that their bodies seemed to collapse under normal life. What made the cases harder was time. The women often became sick years after leaving the factory. That delay gave the company a way to argue that the job was not responsible. The companies also had money, lawyers, and a powerful public story. Radium was safe, radium was useful, radium was the future. The workers had pain, medical bills, and a truth that was still difficult to prove in court. For a while, the burden fell on the women to prove that the shining paint had been killing them. Science slowly caught up. In 1925, pathologist Harrison Martland showed that radium was poisoning the dial painters from inside their bones. He found that their bodies had become radioactive. This was not ordinary sickness. This was industrial poisoning. The women had not merely touched a dangerous substance, they had been instructed to ingest it as part of the job. Martland's work mattered because it translated suffering into evidence. The women had been told their symptoms were unrelated, or private, or impossible to connect to the factory. Scientific measurement changed the battlefield. If radium could be detected in the body years later, then the companies could no longer hide behind delay. The poison had left a signature. The measurements also revealed a terrifying asymmetry. Scientists knew enough to treat radium carefully in controlled settings. Researchers used shielding, instruments, and caution. But the dial painters were given brushes, jars, and reassurance. The same substance that commanded respect in a laboratory was treated casually when young working women handled it for production. In New Jersey, 5 women became the center of the legal fight: Grace Fryer, Quinta MacDonald, Albina Larice, Edna Hussman, and Catherine Schaub. They were ill, exhausted, and running out of time. Their lawyer, Raymond Berry, took the case against the United States Radium Corporation. The company delayed. The women were forced to give testimony from sickbeds. The case became national news. The delay was part of the cruelty. Legal time and bodily time moved at different speeds. A corporation could wait. A sick worker could not. Hearings were postponed. Doctors argued. Lawyers challenged dates, symptoms, and responsibility. The women were not only fighting disease, they were fighting the clock. One of the important figures in the scientific side of the fight was Elizabeth Hughes, a physicist with experience measuring radium. Work connected to the National Bureau of Standards helped bring authority to the measurements. This mattered because the trial was not only about sympathy, it was about proof. The women needed the invisible made visible. The New Jersey case ended in a settlement in 1928. It did not undo what had happened. It did not bring back the dead. But it forced the danger of radium into public view. Newspapers could no longer treat the dial painters as isolated mysteries. The glowing paint had a cost, and that cost had been carried by young women who had been told they were safe. The story did not end in New Jersey. In Ottawa, Illinois, women at the Radium Dial Company faced the same pattern: assurances, sickness, denial, and a legal fight. Catherine Wolfe Donahue became one of the central figures there. By the time she fought her case, she was gravely ill. The company appealed again and again, but the Illinois workers helped push occupational disease law forward, and their case strengthened the idea that employers could be held responsible for industrial poisoning. Ottawa shows why this was not one bad factory or one local scandal. It was a system repeating itself. The product changed hands, companies changed names, and the language of reassurance continued. Workers were praised for precision and discipline, but when illness came, they were treated as problems to be managed, rather than people to be protected. The Illinois case also helped clarify something that now seems obvious. A disease caused by work is still a workplace injury, even if it appears years later. That idea was not automatic in the early 20th century. The Radium Girls helped force law and medicine to recognize slow violence, harm that accumulates quietly, invisibly, and profitably. This is why the Radium Girls matter beyond the horror of the details. Their story changed how people understood workplace danger. A hazard does not have to be loud. It does not have to smell bad. It does not have to injure immediately. It can be invisible, beautiful, profitable, and still be deadly. Their fight helped shape later safety standards, radiation research, and the moral expectation that workers should not have to sacrifice their bodies for someone else's product. There is another layer to the story. Many scientists and managers knew far more than the workers did. Radium was handled carefully in laboratories by people who understood its risks. Yet, in the dial rooms, young women were told to put brushes in their mouths. The gap between expert caution and worker exposure is the real indictment. The danger was not only radium, it was the decision to keep that knowledge away from the people most at risk. Today, old radium dials can still be radioactive. The glow may fade, but the material remains a warning. These watches and instruments are artifacts of a century that confused brightness with progress. They remind us that new technology often arrives wearing the language of wonder before the bill is fully understood. The Radium Girls did not set out to become symbols. They wanted jobs, wages, health, and truth. But by forcing their suffering into the public record, they helped build a world where industrial danger could no longer hide behind a beautiful product. The glow that once made them famous became evidence, and the evidence became a legacy. No miracle is worth a human life when the people asked to touch it are denied the truth.